begins the way most stories in the African bush begin, with heat, shimmering, pressing, relentless heat rolling off the savanna, in waves that blur the line between earth and sky. The grass is dry and golden, brittle enough to crackle underfoot, and the air smells of dust and something older, something prehistoric. Out here, in the open woodlands of East Africa, every single living thing is engaged in the same fundamental negotiation, the one between staying alive and becoming someone else's meal. If you find yourself gripped by stories like this one, the kind where survival hangs by a thread and nature delivers outcomes nobody could predict, then you are exactly where you belong. Hit subscribe right now, because every week we go deeper into the moments that define life and death in the wild. Do not miss what comes next. The impala is not a creature that tends to inspire awe in the way a lion does, or command reverence the way an elephant does. It is slender and light, built more like a sketch than a sculpture. Its legs are impossibly thin, its frame so lean it seems almost fragile. But that impression is dangerously misleading. The impala is one of the most successful large mammals on the African continent, and its success is not accidental. Every part of this animal, from the placement of its eyes to the coiled spring tension in its hindquarters, has been shaped by millions of years of pressure from the animals that want to eat it. And of all those animals, few have shaped the impala more deeply than the leopard. The leopard is a different kind of problem. Lions are visible, hyenas are loud, wild dogs are persistent but obvious, giving chase across open ground where the race is fair and the rules are clear. The leopard plays by no such rules. It comes from the shadows. It uses silence, the way other predators use speed. It is patient in a way that feels almost calculated, almost intelligent in its stillness. A leopard can lie in a tree for hours without moving a muscle, its spotted coat dissolving perfectly into the dappled patchwork of light and shadow, and the prey below will have no idea, none whatsoever, until the moment the leopard moves. And then it is usually too late. It is late afternoon in the Masai Mara, and the light has shifted from the hard white glare of midday into something richer and more golden. Shadows stretch long across the grass. The air has cooled just slightly, enough to bring the impala herd out from the shade of the acacia groves and back into the open grassland to feed. There are perhaps 40 of them, moving in that loose, relaxed formation herds use when they feel safe, heads dipping and rising rhythmically, ears rotating in slow sweeps to catch the sounds of the afternoon. Among them is a young female. She is perhaps 2 years old, fully grown, but still carrying some of the vulnerability of youth in the way she moves. A fraction less wary than the older animals, a fraction slower to look up from the grass. She grazes near the eastern edge of the herd, close to a line of low scrub that borders a seasonal stream. The stream is dry now, its bed cracked and pale, but the scrub along its banks has stayed green enough to provide cover. She does not know that something is already watching her. The leopard has been here for the better part of an hour. She is a young female too, perhaps 3 years old, lean and hungry, with the particular focused energy of a predator that has not eaten in several days. She found this position carefully, working upwind of the herd, using the scrub along the stream bank to conceal her approach, and settling into a crouch so low and so still that from even a short distance away, she is entirely invisible. Only her tail moves, the faintest twitch at the tip, involuntary, impossible to stop entirely. She is watching the young impala. A leopard does not rush. This is perhaps the most important thing to understand about the way it hunts. Speed matters, but only at the very end, and only if everything before that end has gone according to plan. What comes before the sprint is something closer to sculpture than to sport. The leopard shapes herself to the landscape, becomes part of it, and waits. She reads the herd the way a skilled reader reads a page, scanning for the detail that matters, the animal that is too young, too old, too far from the group, too distracted. She is looking for the error. The young female drifts a little further from the herd, just a few meters, but enough. She drops her head to a thick clump of grass, and the angle of her gaze shifts downward. Her ears are still working, rotating and scanning, but the sound of the herd around her, the soft footfalls, and the occasional snort, is providing a kind of auditory camouflage. She is listening to too much at once, and the leopard knows it. The leopard begins to move. She comes out of the scrub in a low rush, not yet at full speed, still crouched and angled, so that the scrub behind her continues to break her outline. 30 meters. 25. 20. The impala herd picks up the movement before the young female does. There is an explosion of alarm snorts, a thunder of hooves, as 40 animals scatter in every direction, and the young female's head comes up in a burst of panic. She is already too late. The leopard covers the last 15 meters in less than 2 seconds. She launches herself upward and forward in that arching, devastating leap that leopards produce in the final moment of a kill. Foreleg extended, claws splayed, and she connects with the young impala's hindquarters, dragging her sideways off balance. The impala goes down hard on her side in a cloud of dust, and the leopard is on top of her instantly, one paw driving into her neck, the other gripping her shoulder, jaws reaching for the throat. But the grip is not perfect. This is a young leopard, and the kill is not as clean as it might be. She has the impala down, and she has her jaws around the throat, but the angle is wrong, and the dust and the struggling of the prey have disrupted the precision of her technique. She is applying pressure, but not enough to cut off blood flow and oxygen quickly, and the impala is still fighting, legs churning, body twisting with the blind and furious strength that living things produce when death is immediate and real. And then something unexpected happens. The impala stops. Not gradually, not in the slow fading way of an animal losing consciousness. Suddenly, completely, one moment, she is thrashing with every ounce of her remaining strength, and the next, she is simply still. Her legs extend, her body goes slack, her head drops to the ground. Her eyes are open but unfocused, staring at nothing. She looks, for all the world, like an animal that has just died. The leopard holds her grip for another moment, then eases it slightly. She steps back just a fraction, still straddling the impala's body, and she sniffs. She sniffs the air. She sniffs the body beneath her, and she reads what she finds there. The impala is not moving. The impala is not breathing in the fast, shallow way of extreme panic. Everything the leopard's senses are telling her is saying the same thing. The prey is dead. The leopard releases her throat hold. She stands over the body, panting from the effort of the sprint and the struggle, and she looks around. This is a critical moment in any leopard's kill sequence. The prey is down, but the environment is still dangerous. Lions could be nearby. Hyenas could be watching. Even a large group of baboons can mob a leopard off a fresh kill. She needs to move the carcass, and she needs to do it quickly. Leopards typically haul their kills into trees to protect them, and this one is no different in her instincts. She grips the impala by the neck and begins to drag. The impala is not dead. What has happened inside this small, trembling body is one of the most remarkable and least understood phenomena in the animal kingdom. The impala has not fainted in the simple sense of the word. She has not merely lost consciousness from blood loss or oxygen deprivation, though both of those things have been pushing at the edges of her awareness. What has happened is something more precise and more extraordinary. Her nervous system has triggered a response that is sometimes called tonic immobility, and sometimes called thanatosis, and sometimes called, in language that is almost too ordinary for what it truly is, playing dead. Tonic immobility is not a choice. It is not a strategy in the conscious, deliberate sense that a human might devise a strategy. It is a biological response, as involuntary as a heartbeat, triggered by a specific combination of circumstances, an overwhelming physical threat, the sensation of being pinned or constrained, the perception of inevitable death. When these conditions align in precisely the right way, something in the mammalian nervous system can simply switch. The animal goes rigid and then slack. Its heart rate drops. Its breathing becomes almost imperceptible. Its muscles go limp. It produces none of the biological signals, the smell of fresh adrenaline, the heat of intense exertion, the feel of active struggling, that a predator associates with live prey. It mimics death with a precision that no performance could achieve, because it is not a performance. It is real. The animal genuinely enters a state that is physiologically distinct from both normal consciousness and ordinary unconsciousness. Scientists have documented this response in a remarkable range of species. Sharks can be induced into tonic immobility by turning them upside down. Certain insects freeze when touched in the right way. Some bird species go completely limp when grabbed by predators. Opossums are famous enough for it that their name has become a verb in the English language. But tonic immobility in impalas is not something that happens frequently enough to have made it into common knowledge, and what is happening here, in this cloud of dust, in the Masai Mara, is something that very few observers have ever had the opportunity to see. The leopard drags the limp body toward the trees. She is strong for her size, as all leopards are, but an adult impala weighs the better part of 40 kilograms, and the ground is rough with stones and tufts of old grass, and the drag is slow. She stops twice, standing over the body and scanning the surrounding grassland for signs of approach from other predators. She sees nothing threatening. She continues to drag. The impala's body bounces and rolls with each pull, completely slack, the legs trailing loosely. To look at her is to see an animal that is unambiguously dead. There is nothing in her appearance that suggests otherwise. But inside that still body, something is waiting. The physiological state of tonic immobility cannot be held indefinitely. The nervous system that triggers it also monitors it, and under certain conditions, it can be reversed just as quickly and completely as it was initiated. The key factor appears to be the removal of the immediate triggering stimulus, the sensation of being pinned, the presence of the predator in direct contact. When those stimuli begin to shift or reduce, the system that forced the shutdown can begin to allow a restart. The leopard has dragged the impala perhaps 12 meters from where she brought her down. She pauses at the base of a broad acacia tree, drops the body, and stands with her head up, ears forward, scanning again. Her grip on the impala's neck has been intermittent during the drag, releasing and re-establishing as the terrain demanded. And during one of those releases, something begins to shift in the impala's nervous system. It is not immediate. It is not the sudden snapping back to awareness that the word waking implies. It is slower and stranger than that, more like the gradual return of a tide. The impala's eyes, which have been open and unfocused throughout, begin to show the faintest change in their quality. Her legs, which have been utterly limp, develop the very beginnings of tension at the joints. Her breathing, which has been nearly undetectable, deepens by a fraction. The leopard does not notice any of this. She is focused on the tree above her, calculating her route up with the weight of the kill. She turns to grip the impala's neck again, preparing for the haul upward, and the impala explodes. There is no other word for it. In a single, violent, galvanic instant, the impala goes from absolute stillness to absolute motion. All four legs drive into the ground simultaneously, launching her body sideways and upward, away from the leopard, away from the tree, into the open grass. The leopard, caught completely off guard by the movement, spins and reaches, but her claws find nothing but air. The impala is already running at full speed, running with the kind of desperate, flat-out velocity that her species can produce, but rarely has to sustain for long, because at full speed, an impala is astonishingly, almost impossibly fast. The leopard gives chase. She has to. This is her meal, the meal she has been hunting for days, and she is not ready to surrender it without an effort. She covers the first few strides with explosive acceleration, her own body built for speed over short distances, and for a moment, the gap between them narrows. But the impala's shock recovery has given her a head start, and the start matters enormously at the speeds these animals reach. The impala also has something working in her favor that she does not consciously know about. She is running toward the other members of her herd, or at least toward the direction they scattered, and as she runs, she is alarm calling, a sharp, barking sound that carries across the grassland and reaches the ears of every impala within several hundred meters. The effect of those calls is not to bring the herd to her, but to galvanize every animal in earshot into its own flat-out flight, and the sudden eruption of movement and sound from multiple directions creates a confusion of targets and trajectories that a single predator cannot easily resolve. The leopard makes 4 more strides, 5, and then she pulls up. She does not do so because she has given up in any emotional sense. She pulls up because her body's calculations are rapid and unsentimental, and they are telling her that the cost of continuing this chase is outpacing the probability of success. The Impala's lead is too great. The surrounding movement is too chaotic. The energy expenditure of a prolonged chase at this pace is something she cannot afford when she is already running on a depleted fuel reserve. She stops, stands for a moment, watching the receding form of the Impala, and then she turns back toward the tree. There is nothing under the tree. She stands at the base of the acacia, looking at the flattened grass where the body lay, and the absence there is total. The Impala is gone. She is not dead, has not been dead, and was never going to be dead from that encounter, even though every sense the leopard possesses told her otherwise. The young female leopard's first real solo hunt has ended in failure, and she must begin again. The Impala runs until the grassland opens out into a wider clearing, until her legs finally consent to slow, and her lungs catch up with the demand she has placed on them. She slows to a canter, then a trot, then a walk, her sides heaving, her nostrils wide and working. She rejoins the scattered fragments of her herd gradually, and the herd itself gradually reassembles, the alarm calls fading, the frantic flight decelerating into the cautious, high-headed wariness of animals returning from a fright. She is alive. The dust where she lay settles. The afternoon light continues its long golden slide toward evening. Somewhere behind her, the leopard is already working through the tall grass at the edge of the stream, planning her next approach, recalibrating, beginning again. The transaction between predator and prey in the African bush does not conclude. It simply pauses, and then it begins again, somewhere else. To understand how extraordinary the Impala's escape truly was, it is worth sitting with the mechanics of it for a moment. Because tonic immobility is not simply a passive state. It is not the animal giving up, and it is not an accident of physiology that happens to look like death. It appears to be an active biological strategy, shaped by millions of years of selection pressure, encoded so deeply into the animal's nervous system that it can deploy without any conscious involvement from the animal at all. Think about the evolutionary logic. A predator that catches prey expects movement, expects struggle, expects the biological signatures of a living animal fighting for its life. When those signals stop, the predator's kill sequence is disrupted. The sequence that ends with a dead animal is designed to proceed from a live one. It includes maintaining grip, applying continued pressure, monitoring for signs of life. When the prey stops providing the input that drives that sequence forward, the sequence stalls. And while it stalls, the prey is in the most dangerous possible position, physically, in the predator's grasp, apparently helpless, without any ability to flee, and yet, in some fraction of cases, the stalling of the predator's sequence creates a window. The grip loosens for a moment. The predator looks away. The predator pauses to scan for threats. And in that window, the nervous system of the prey does something astonishing. It fires back up, all the way, not gradually, not cautiously, but completely and instantly, like a motor going from zero to maximum throttle with no intermediate steps. The survival value of this is obvious in retrospect, but the fact that it works at all depends on an extraordinary alignment of factors. The timing has to be right. Too early, and the predator is still fully engaged and will simply tighten its grip. Too late, and the damage is irretrievable. The prey animal cannot consciously judge this timing, and yet the system produces the correct judgment in at least some cases, because the animals that produced the correct timing in the past were the ones that survived to reproduce. The ones whose systems timed it wrong did not. Over millions of generations, what is left is a system tuned to remarkable precision. It is worth noting that tonic immobility is not unique to mammals, and its distribution across the animal kingdom suggests that it is an ancient response, something that may have existed in the ancestors of modern vertebrates long before any of the specific predator-prey relationships we see today were established. It has been documented in rabbits and guinea pigs, in chickens and ducks, in various species of shark, in insects, in some reptiles. In each case, it looks slightly different, but the core features are consistent. A state of profound motor inhibition, reduced sensitivity to external stimulation, apparent or actual reduction in heart rate and respiration, and the potential for rapid reversal under the right conditions. In laboratory settings, researchers have been able to induce tonic immobility in various species, and have observed that animals in this state genuinely do experience altered physiology, not merely altered behavior. Blood chemistry changes, hormone levels shift. The state is real, in a biological sense, that goes well beyond what any deliberate behavioral mimicry could produce. And this is precisely why it works on predators. A predator that has evolved to detect the difference between live and dead prey, and to respond differently to each, is genuinely being given false information. The prey is not pretending to be dead. In the relevant physiological sense, the prey is registering in its own body and broadcasting externally all the signals of an animal that has died, while simultaneously maintaining the barely perceptible minimum of biological function needed to restart. There is something almost philosophical about this, if you allow yourself to sit with it. The impala, in the leopard's grip, is not dead. But it is not, in the normal sense, alive either. It exists in a kind of biological in-between that has no good name, a state that natural selection has carved out, precisely because it occupies the crack between the predator's categories of live prey and dead prey, and that crack, however narrow, is large enough for an animal to survive through. The impala herd settles as the evening approaches. They move in the direction of water, because at the end of every day, if there is water within range, they will drink. The waterhole is a few kilometers to the west, and they move toward it, with the purposeful economy of animals on familiar ground. They know this route. They know these landmarks. They know, in the way that animals know things without articulating them, which parts of this path require more alertness, and which allow the herd to relax slightly and move faster. The young female is in the middle of the group now, not at the edge where the risk is higher. Whether this is deliberate or simply an expression of some deeply embedded post-fright behavior that pushes survivor animals toward the center of social groups is difficult to say. But she is there, moving with the herd, her legs still functional, her body apparently undamaged by an encounter that should, by most reasonable calculations, have killed her. She is bleeding slightly from the claw marks on her hindquarters. The wounds are shallow. They will be a vulnerability for a while, an attraction to flies, and a potential source of infection in an environment that is far from sterile, but they will heal. The mechanics of her tendons and muscles and bones are intact. The impala herself is, in every practical sense, unbroken. At the waterhole, the herd drinks in the careful, watchful way of prey animals at water, heads down for seconds, and then up again, scanning, heads down again. The water is muddy and warm, but they drink it without hesitation. The young female drinks too, and there is nothing in her behavior at the water's edge that marks her as different from any other animal in the herd. She drinks, she raises her head, she looks at the darkening horizon, she drinks again. Somewhere to the east, back near the stream and the acacia tree, the leopard is hunting again. She has moved into a different area now, following the edge of the stream south, reading the ground for signs of movement. She is hungry, and she will not stop until she has eaten, and this persistence is not something she can turn off or moderate. It is what she is. It is what the same millions of years of selection pressure have made her. The leopard that stopped trying when the hunt failed did not leave offspring. The one that tried again did. And the one that hunts tonight is the heir to all of that trying. The bush does not deal in justice or fairness or narrative satisfaction. It deals in outcomes. Tonight, the outcome for the young impala was survival, against odds that were approximately as close to zero as odds can be without actually reaching it. Tomorrow those odds will reset, and the day after that, and every day for the rest of this animal's life. Every drink at a waterhole, every night spent in the open, every walk through tall grass near a stream bank carries the same fundamental risk, the same negotiation with death that every impala has been conducting since the species came into being. And occasionally, on a late afternoon in the golden light, when the dust hangs in the air and the leopard is hungry and the timing is just right, the animal that should have died finds a way to not die, and it runs back into the herd and drinks muddy water at sunset, and the grassland continues on. The young female impala will not know, in any conscious sense, what happened to her today. She has no framework for understanding tonic immobility, no narrative she can construct around her own survival, no awareness of the biological mechanism that saved her life. What she has is simpler and more durable than understanding. She is alive. Her nervous system is intact and tuned and ready. She will return to this grassland tomorrow, and the day after that, and she will graze and drink and breathe the dust-scented air of the Masai Mara. And if another leopard finds her, the same system will be there, waiting in the background, ready to do what it has always done. The Impala's story is also the leopard's story, and to follow only one thread of it is to miss something important. The young female leopard will have to go back to the fundamental work of survival immediately, because leopards do not have the option of waiting out their hunger. She will hunt again tonight. She may succeed, and she may fail, and if she fails enough times in a row, her own survival will begin to come into question. A leopard that cannot eat becomes weak, and a weak leopard cannot hunt effectively, and that downward spiral, once begun, is difficult to reverse. This is the machinery underneath the drama. The spectacular moment, the leopard's leap, the impala's impossible revival, the flat-out chase across the golden grass. These moments are real, and they are extraordinary, and they deserve to be witnessed and described with full attention. But they are also the surface expression of a process that runs continuously and without pause, the process of organisms competing for the resources they need to persist through time. Every adaptation, every behavior, every biological trick in the arsenal of either the impala or the leopard is the product of that competition, shaped across time by nothing more complex and nothing more indifferent than the question of which individuals made it to reproduce and which did not. Tonic immobility in impalas, to the extent that it exists and functions as the encounter we have just witnessed suggests it can, is not an exception to this process. It is a product of it. At some point in the evolutionary history of this species, or the ancestors of this species, some individuals happened to carry the genetic variation that allowed their nervous systems to make this response. Those individuals, on occasions when the right circumstances aligned, survived encounters that others did not. They reproduced. Their offspring carried the variation. Over time, the frequency of that variation in the population increased, and what was once a rare accident became an established feature of the species' biology. This is how all of it works. The leopard's spotted coat, and its patience, and its extraordinary muscular power, and its ability to haul prey twice its weight into a tree 20 feet off the ground. The impala's alarm calls, and its explosive speed, and the placement of its eyes, and the social structure of its herds. All of it. The product of the same relentless, ongoing process, playing out across millions of years, with each generation of successes and failures writing the next chapter of what these animals are. What we see when we watch a leopard hunt an impala in the Masai Mara is not the exception to that process. We are watching the process itself. We are watching evolution performing its own work, in real time, in bodies and behaviors that are still being shaped and reshaped by every encounter, every outcome, every impala that escapes, and every one that does not. The sun drops below the acacia trees, and the sky turns shades of orange and deep red, and then violet. The night insects begin their rhythm. Somewhere a hyena sounds its distinctive rising call, and from across the grassland, another answers. The nocturnal shift is beginning, the transition from the predators and prey of daylight to the different set of hunters and the hunted that own the dark. The impala herd moves together toward a stand of trees where they will spend the night, clustered close, ears working, a collective nervous system made of 40 individual animals. They are not safe. They will never be safe. Not in the way that word implies some final achieved security, but they are alive, and they will be alive tomorrow. And among them, the young female, with the healing claw marks on her hindquarters, will sleep in whatever way an impala sleeps, alert and ready. The remarkable system inside her body, still tuned and coiled, and waiting for the moment it might be needed again. Out on the grassland, in the dark between the trees, the leopard moves, silent, precise, patient, beginning again. The African bush is full of moments that seem impossible. An animal shakes off a crocodile's grip. A wildebeest, surrounded by lions, simply keeps running until the lions tire. A young elephant, separated from its herd, walks for days through the territory of predators and finds its family again. We watch these things, And we call them miracles, because we do not have a better word ready to hand for the outcomes that contradict our expectations. But they are not miracles. They are something more interesting than miracles, because miracles imply suspension of natural law, whereas what these animals do is the fullest possible expression of natural law. They are the result of systems refined by time into a precision that can still, in the right moment, produce something that looks like the impossible. The Impala that played dead for a leopard is not a miracle. She is the living argument for the power of the systems that built her. She is what survival looks like when it operates not through strength or speed or intelligence in any conscious sense, but through biology, tuned so precisely by so many generations of selection that even death itself becomes a tool the living can borrow and return. She breathes, she stands, she walks into the dark with her herd. And that, in the end, is everything. In the days that follow, the Masai Mara does what it always does. It continues. The grass grows and is eaten and grows again. The rain, when it comes, turns the hard, pale ground to soft brown mud that holds the prints of every animal that crosses it. The wildebeest are moving somewhere to the north, a dark river of bodies that takes days to pass and fills the air with a sound like continuous low thunder. The lions on the eastern plain have made a kill and have been feeding for 2 days, and now they lie in the shade of a wide thorn tree, their bellies heavy, their eyes half closed, their breathing slow. The young female impala is in a group of about a dozen animals feeding along the western edge of the grassland, not far from where the encounter with the leopard took place. The wounds on her hindquarters have begun to dry, and the flies that troubled them for the first couple of days have found other interests. She moves normally. She eats. She lifts her head periodically and scans, and finds nothing that demands alarm. She will almost certainly encounter a predator again. Not today, perhaps not this week, but the Masai Mara is not a safe landscape, and the density of predators here is among the highest on the continent. It is one of the reasons this ecosystem is so extraordinary to witness. This pressure that keeps every prey animal calibrated to its highest possible alertness, and keeps every predator calibrated to its highest possible skill. The ecosystem is maintained, in a kind of dynamic tension, by the ongoing competition between the things that eat and the things that are eaten, and every individual in it is both a product of that tension and a current contributor to it. The leopard has eaten. 2 nights after the failed hunt, she succeeded with a young male impala near the western tree line. A cleaner kill, the grip precise, and the animal down before any of the complications of the previous attempt had a chance to arise. She spent 2 days in a tree with the carcass, sleeping and eating in that leisurely, anchored way that leopards use a successful kill, dropping down to drink at intervals and returning to the branches. She looked across the grassland from her height in the tree with the particular unfocused gaze of a predator that is, for the moment, satisfied. But satisfied is temporary. Everything in this landscape is temporary, and the tension between predator and prey is the one permanent feature, the one constant around which everything else revolves. There is a dry riverbed, a few miles to the south of where all of this took place, and along its banks, a troop of baboons has been spending its mornings. The baboons are large and loud and thoroughly disruptive to any hunting in their vicinity because they see everything and announce it to the world at considerable volume. Leopards in particular tend to avoid areas where baboons are present and active, not because they fear the baboons exactly, but because the noise they make alerts every other animal in range and makes hunting effectively almost impossible. The young female leopard has learned, in the empirical way that leopards learn things, to track the baboon troop's movements and to hunt in places and at times when the troop is elsewhere. She will spend the better part of her life accumulating this kind of knowledge, building a map of her territory that includes not just the physical features, the water sources and the tree lines and the open ground and the dense cover, but also the patterns and habits of the animals within it, both the ones she hunts and the ones that interfere with her hunting. A leopard in the Masai Mara must be a sophisticated analyst of landscape and behavior, and the ones that develop this sophistication most completely are the ones that survive longest and raise the most offspring. The ones that fail to develop it do not last. The margin between those two outcomes, between the leopard that learns and the one that does not, is not enormous. But in a landscape this demanding, it does not need to be enormous. Small differences in skill and knowledge and timing compound across a lifetime into vast differences in outcome. The Impala also learns, though in a different register. She cannot consciously analyze and strategize in the way we might imagine, but her behavior is continuously modified by experience in ways that are real and meaningful. An animal that has been attacked by a predator and survived shows measurable changes in behavior in the days and weeks that follow. She will be more alert, more reactive to alarm signals from other animals, more likely to position herself toward the center of the herd rather than the edges. She will spend slightly more time scanning and slightly less time with her head down in the grass. These behavioral modifications reduce her risk, not to zero. Nothing reduces it to zero, but to something less than it was before. And so both of them, the leopard and the Impala, move forward from that afternoon in the dust, with their systems updated, their approaches modified, in whatever small ways experience has pushed them, and they will carry those updates into every encounter that follows. The Impala that played dead and the leopard that lost a kill are both, in this sense, slightly different animals than they were before it happened, slightly better calibrated, slightly more precisely tuned. This is what the Masai Mara does with its inhabitants. It refines them, continuously, ruthlessly, without sentiment or preference. It refines the prey and the predator alike, and in doing so, it maintains the extraordinary ecosystem that makes this place one of the most spectacular on Earth. To stand at the edge of the grassland at dusk and watch the light change over the Masai Mara is to feel the scale of time that has produced what you are seeing. The grass and the acacia trees, and the dust and the animals moving through it. These are not static. They are the current expression of a process